I always thought our life was perfect. Susie and I had been married for 7 years. We had two beautiful boys, 4 and 6 years old, and I thought we were living the American dream. I had a steady job in upper management at a tech company, earning enough to live comfortably. Susie had a job in the accounting department of a small company, and we had big dreams of retiring one day and enjoying life without worries. We had worked hard for this life, and I believed that we were happy. Every day followed a routine. We both left for work at the same time, taking turns, dropping the kids off at daycare and preschool. We texted during the day, and I usually picked up the kids from daycare while Susie cooked dinner. After dinner, we spent time with the kids, watched a little televisions, put them to bed, and then had our adult time. It wasn't perfect, but it was our life. It was the way we had always done things, and it worked. There were no complaints from either of us about the balance we had struck. But things started to change. Slowly at first, then more obviously as time went on. It began with Susie's new friendship at work. A woman named Anne was hired at her company, and from the moment they met, it seemed like Susie and Anne were inseparable. They started talking about spending weekends together, having barbecues, and organizing play dates for our boys with Anne's kids, who were the same age as ours. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, they were both married, had children the same age, and seemed to get along well. But there was something about Anne that made me uncomfortable. I didn't like her. She was bossy, rude, and openly disrespectful toward her husband, Paul. It was hard to watch how she dominated him in public, always barking orders while he meekly obeyed her. I couldn't imagine living in a relationship like that, where one person held all the power and the other had none. Paul seemed like a broken man, and then seemed to take pleasure in making sure he stayed that way. Despite my misgivings about her, I tried to stay open-minded. I didn't want to make any judgments before getting to know her better. So, Susie and I agreed to spend more time with Anne and Paul. It wasn't long before weekends at each other's houses became a regular thing. The kids played together, and we shared barbecues and drinks. Anne was always on her best behavior. But Paul, he was a mess. I began to notice something strange happening over the weeks. Susie's behavior started to change. She was coming home later and later on Wednesday nights when she went out with Anne and some other girls from work. At first, it wasn't anything I thought much about. She'd tell me that she had been caught up talking about a work issue and the time had gotten away from her. I didn't mind. I trusted her, and I had no reason not to. But after a couple of weeks, she started coming home around 11. 30 pa, ma. Then it was midnight. It was becoming a regular occurrence. And that's when I started to feel uneasy. At first, she brushed it off, explaining that she just got caught up in conversation, or that Anne had smoked and she had to shower to get rid of the smell. I believed her, but a part of me started questioning the truth. Why would she shower every time she came home late from one of these nights out with Anne and the other girls? And why was she always so tired? She had never been the type of person to come home drained and irritable after a night out. We were always active together, even after a late night. It wasn't until a couple of weeks later that things started to spiral. I began to feel a cold distance between us. The intimacy we had once shared 3 to 4 times a week was now becoming infrequent, and when we did have sex, it felt off. It wasn't the same. She was distant, unengaged, and not the way she had been before. At first, I chalked it up to stress or exhaustion, but deep down, I started to feel something else, something darker. I started noticing little things, her phone buzzing late at night, or the way she would quickly close apps when I walked into the room. It didn't make sense. I wasn't the type of person to snoop through her phone. But a seed of suspicion had been planted, and it grew day by day. One night, I decided to take a closer look. After Susie went to bed, I opened her phone. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but something inside me urged me to see if I was just imagining things. When I unlocked it, I found a series of texts from Anne. They were cryptic, full of inside jokes and references to things I didn't understand. The messages were innocuous on the surface, but there was one that caught my attention. It was a simple message from Anne. I can't wait for Wednesday. It's going to be fun. You know what we talked about? My heart sank. What was this about? What had they been planning? My gut told me that this wasn't just innocent girl talk. And that was when the wave of doubt completely overtook me. I started replaying everything in my mind. Susie's late nights, the secrecy, the phone messages. It all began to line up. And the truth hit me hard. Susie wasn't just out with the girls. She was hiding something from me. But what could it be? The next day, I confronted her. I asked about the messages, about the late nights, about the changes I had noticed. She initially laughed it off, saying it was all just innocent fun. But the more I pushed, the more her tone changed. I could see the panic in her eyes. She was caught. But instead of coming clean, she turned defensive, saying, You're just being paranoid. It's nothing. Trust me. But I couldn't trust her anymore. Every doubt, every little suspicion, all of it suddenly became real. I knew deep down that something was wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. And when I finally did manage to close my eyes, I had a nightmare. In it, I saw Susie in a hotel room with another man. They were laughing, touching, and it was as if I didn't exist. But it would be my base. I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The nightmare felt like a warning, but it also felt like a reality I had been avoiding. The truth was inevitable, and I knew I couldn't keep ignoring the signs. I had to find out what was really going on. But how? How do you confront someone who has built a wall of lies around you? How do you tear it down? The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. Susie, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me, continued with her routine, the late-night outings, the constant excuses, the distant attitude. Nothing had changed in her world, but everything had shifted in mine. I started to feel like I was living in two separate realities. My heart and mind kept battling. One part of me wanted to believe her, to trust that she was just stressed and everything would go back to normal. But the other part, the smarter part, the one that had been observing the little signs, knew that something was off. I spent hours thinking, planning, trying to figure out what I could do next. I couldn't let this feeling of helplessness control me any longer. I needed to know the truth, the full truth. I couldn't confront her based on mere suspicions. I had to find solid proof. It wasn't long before I realized I was sinking deeper into this web of lies. Every time Susie came home late, I became more and more certain that something was wrong. The once warm and familiar home felt cold and foreign. My mind was consumed with questions, and every small action she took seemed to raise new doubts. And then one day, I decided I had to follow her. I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until she left for one of her infamous Wednesday night outings and decided to see for myself where she was really going. It wasn't easy, and I hated myself for having to resort to this. But I felt like I had no other option. I followed her discreetly. I wanted answers, and I wasn't going to sit back and let this go on any longer. I followed her for miles, my heart racing as I tried to stay hidden. Eventually, she pulled into a parking lot I didn't recognize, and my stomach churned. I parked at a safe distance away and waited. I watched her walk into a building with another man. She was laughing, touching his arm as they went inside. I didn't need to see anymore. It was clear now what had been happening. My heart sank. The man wasn't just a colleague or friend. It was obvious she had been hiding this from me for weeks. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her now? Should I let her come home and pretend that nothing happened? My mind raced as I tried to calm myself. But deep down, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her continue this lie, not without at least trying to confront her and make her see what she had done. Later that night, when Susie returned home, I was ready. I could see the guilt in her eyes as soon as she walked through the door. She knew she had been caught, but instead of denying it or coming clean, she tried to brush it off, as if I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't let that happen. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. So, how was your night out? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Susie's face paled. She had no idea how much I knew. Her reaction confirmed it all. It was fine, she said quickly, avoiding my gaze. Just a dinner with the girls. Really? I said, my voice sharp now. Is that why you were out with him? The guy I saw you walk into the building with. Her eyes widened. And for a moment, I thought she might collapse right there. Jack, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's not what you think. I wasn't having any of it. No, Susie, I know exactly what's going on. It was going on. I've been following the signs for months. You've been lying to me, hiding things from me. What have you been doing behind my back? There was a long pause. Her eyes welled with tears. But she didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth hung between us like an unspoken confession. She had been unfaithful, and I knew it. She finally looked up at me, her face filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. I'm sorry, Jack, but I've already made my decision. I can't go back now. This is who I am, and you'll just have to deal with it. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. Deal with it, I echoed, disbelief in my voice. You think I can just accept that? You think I'll just let this go? Susie seemed unfazed, almost cold. She shrugged, as if this was all just a game, something she could easily brush off. What do you want me to say? It's not like you'll leave me. You can't. The kids need me, and you can't afford a divorce. So we'll just keep going the way we are. The way we were. Her words stung because she was right in some ways. I couldn't just walk away, not with the kids to think about, not with the financial ramifications of divorce. But her dismissive attitude, her coldness, made me see just how far she had gone. I had to do something. I couldn't let her believe that I was as powerless as she thought I was. I had been living in a haze for the past few weeks, unsure of what my next steps should be. The betrayal weighed on me, and the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Susie had made it clear that she didn't care, and I was beginning to believe that she was right, that I couldn't afford to divorce her, that I would lose everything. But deep down, I knew I couldn't live in a marriage where I was just an accessory to her life. That night, I made the decision. I would take control of this situation, no matter what it took. I couldn't just let her get away with this. If she was going to walk all over me, I would show her just how wrong she was. I began to plan. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about regaining control of my life and ensuring that Susie would face the consequences of her actions. I started by gathering evidence. I didn't want to just accuse her blindly. I wanted proof that would leave no room for doubt. The more I dug, the more I discovered about her secret life, her lies, and her disregard for our family. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the way she had manipulated me, played me for a fool. As I gathered my strength and my plan came together, I knew I had to be strategic. Susie had no idea what was coming. I began to set things into motion without her knowing. I started documenting everything, every lie, every phone call, every late night. And when the time was right, I would strike. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I had everything lined up. Evidence, witnesses, even the financial support I needed to make sure that Susie couldn't escape this time. She had played the game for too long, and it was my turn now. The day came when I knew everything was in place. Susie had no idea what was coming. I watched her leave for another night out, her smug smile betraying her confidence that she was still in control. But little did she know, I had already made arrangements. I had contacted a private investigator, and I had everything I needed to expose her completely. I didn't waste any more time. I filed for divorce, armed with the evidence of her betrayal. I made sure that she knew the truth was out, that her lies had caught up with her. But I didn't stop there. I made sure that the divorce proceedings would be the hardest thing she'd ever gone through. In the end, I didn't need to get angry or bitter. I simply needed to take back control of my life to ensure that Susie couldn't continue to manipulate me. And when she realized that the tables had turned, she knew there was nothing she could do to stop it. The damage was done. I was free. And Susie, she would have to live with the consequences of her actions.